Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the iPhone X. I've been using this one for a couple weeks since it came out, and I've been using it every single day and wanted to share with you the positives and negatives about this phone. Since most people know what these are all about by now, I thought I'd share just those things that I think make it great and not so great. So the first thing is the design. The design I think is one of the best as far as the way it looks since probably the iPhone 4 and the original iPhone. Since this is the 10th iPhone or 10th anniversary iPhone, there's some similarities as far as the nice elegance in the way it looks, and there's some new things, of course, as well. So it's obviously a lot bigger than the original iPhone, but I think as far as the build goes, the positives with this one is the build just feels amazing. It's got a nice continuous feel all the way around it. So as you bring your fingers and your hands around it, if you're not using a case, it feels amazing in your hands as far as the way it's built. It's just super high quality. It feels like one piece, and it's just really well made. This phone was limited in a few ways, and I think the new one is as well, but this one was limited in that it didn't even have an app store when it first came out. The new one is limited in that I think the software isn't as good as it could be. So there's some pros and cons there. So the first thing though, like I said, is the positive is its design is really nice. And obviously on the outside here, this is a polished stainless steel surround. On this one, it's got a black anodized coating or a vapor coating on it. And just like all the other iPhones, we have our volume buttons, our silent switch, nothing on the top. On this side, we now have what they call the side button, which is also the Siri button, the Apple Pay button, and the sleep wake power on off button. We've got our SIM card slot, and then on the bottom, everything's looking pretty familiar. No headphone jack, but we do have our microphone and speaker and lightning port. It also has a glass back with wireless charging, and of course our camera bump there as well. So it's pretty simple. And then on the front, the design is very different, where we have this notch where the sensor is on top. This is going to be something you either love or hate, but the nice smaller bezels really gives it a new, unique look as opposed to iPhones. iPhones of the past have always had a bezel on top and bottom, and this one's been changed. So it's pretty nice, and whether you like it or not may or may not influence your purchase to buy this one. I actually happen to like the notch there. The next positive is the display. It's a Super Retina HD display, 5.8 inches from here to here, and that means that it's got HDR video, or HDR quality. It's a P3 wide color gamut. It also is 2436 by 1125, and it's got 458 pixels per inch. So it's very high resolution. It looks really, really nice. You're not going to see any of these pixels. And of course, it's got 3D touch and all the things we've come to love. It's got a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, and it goes incredibly bright in sunlight. So you want to turn it all the way up. It's fine to see outside. It looks great. It's super bright and vibrant. When it comes to this display, again, you may or may not like the notch. I think it looks pretty good. It's something that's unique at least, and this is more of an informational area now. Now, one thing that's bad about it though is some of the UI with certain apps don't fill the display, and we're still waiting for that. So because of it, it's okay in most situations, but when you have something like this app here for layout, we've got bars at the top and bottom, and it looks very familiar as far as a normal iPhone goes because of that. But with a lot of apps, and it's quickly approaching most apps, it fills the whole display. So it just makes it a little bit nicer when it comes to that. Now, when you're playing a video, you go into videos. This is one of my videos, and what happens is when you rotate the display, you can either have these bars on the side, or if you zoom in, you'll fill the whole display, but you're going to have this notch on the side. So it looks kind of neat this way, but you're not seeing the whole video, and depending on where it's actually framed for the video, you may not see it. So that's one of the things that's not so great, or you might like a lot. Now, the third positive thing is the speakers. The speakers are nice and loud, and it's better stereo as far as the separation goes. We can hear out of this one much louder than we could before. So if I turn it up here all the way, and It's nice and loud. It doesn't really distort or anything, and you hear the sound evenly, whereas before in some of the older ones you didn't hear it as evenly. You might hear it most likely on this end louder than you would out of this speaker, and now I think that's fixed for the most part. So the speaker's really good on this phone. The next great thing is the camera. It's super fast and it's really nice. It'll do 4K 60 video, and it's also pretty decent in low light. It's basically the iPhone 8 Plus camera, but with a couple different lenses on it. So the lenses give it a little bit better optimization as far as low light and some of the video, and they're both optically stabilized now. So the optical stabilization is not just in one, but in both camera lenses, and that makes a big difference. But with all of my videos that I do with reviews, I like to show you some of the capabilities and see what you think for yourself. So let's take a look at some of the photos and videos that this is capable of. Now both rear cameras are stabilized, so as I walk with this, you can see that it's pretty well stabilized, and if I zoom in, it stays pretty well stabilized. It's not amazing, but it does a pretty good job. The front-facing camera is pretty good too, but it's not stabilized, so if I walk here, you'll see that it's kind of bouncy as I'm walking, but for the most part, it does a pretty good job. The next positive thing is the battery life. The battery life's pretty good for me. It's been off the charger for quite some time. I've been using it regularly, and I don't really have any issues with battery. I don't find that it lasts as long as, say, the 8 Plus, for example, but for the most part, it's pretty good. You can see that the usage here is 5 hours and 20 minutes, 10 hours and 40 minutes standby, and I'm at 42% battery life. So it's pretty good. I can't really complain there, and this is since full charge or last full charge. So it's been pretty good as far as battery. I really don't think about it too much. It just seems to work and does its thing. So sometimes, depending on your scenario and how you use it, that's going to vary. But compared to my 8 Plus, it's about the same. In some scenarios, it's better. In others, it's not. It just depends on what you're doing with it. The next positive is it's super fast. The benchmarks are that of MacBook, basically, and not the low-end MacBook, the MacBook Pro when it comes to Geekbench. But things just open quickly. The app switcher, if we go here, we can just go back and forth really fast, go between whatever you want, go back home, open the next app, and things just load quickly like you'd expect. And it's just really good as far as that goes. So everything feels smooth like it should. When you go into the camera, you record something, you jump out of the camera. There's never really any hiccups with this, and it just works really, really good. Finally, the next positive is Face ID. Now, this is controversial, but if you pick it up, it unlocks looking at you. It's not necessarily as fast as Touch ID, but the idea that it can just unlock with your face is really neat. And I was able to capture some of this, how it works. So when you pick it up, it looks at your face basically by projecting dots onto your face. It looks at those dots and sees who it is based on the pattern that's there. That's stored securely on the phone, and it unlocks over and over, but you do have to keep your face aware onto it. And that brings us to our next thing, which is the first negative. Face ID can also be a negative. In fact, in many cases, it's slower than an iPhone 8 Plus with unlocking. So if I pick these up, I'll turn these both off. If you were to put your thumb down and push, or if you even have it to turn on just by putting your thumb down, we'll pick it up, push, now it's unlocked, and I can do this. Now there's a little bit faster way to do that. If you pick up and swipe at the same time, you'll see that it's a little bit slower than Touch ID. So again, it's maybe a half a second to a second slower. So that can present a little bit of a problem as far as speed, and you get used to it. But it's really kind of a neat thing when you go into maybe an app that requires authentication, like 1Password, or anything that you might use that needs authentication, such as Apple Pay. It looks at your face, authenticates, and you're good to go. But the negatives are, it can be tricked a little bit. There's some videos about that. If you're a twin, something like that, or You can kind of trick it in between if you unlock it and it asks for a passcode, someone that looks similar to you, a very similar looking brother or sister, and then you basically put in your password. It kind of learns your face and will allow some people to unlock that device. So that's kind of a negative until they figure that out. And just like Touch ID, I think it'll get faster over time, but right now it's a little bit slower, and I personally don't find it more convenient than Touch ID. I prefer the fingerprint sensor myself. I like the idea of this, but I kind of like the idea of both. Maybe if you had one here too. The next negative is iOS 11. On this particular device, it doesn't feel specifically optimized for iPhone 10. And iOS 11 might be a little bit behind that way, since Apple themselves said they were really planning to release this phone next year around the time when iOS 12 would be out. So maybe there's some optimization. So in certain apps, like the music app, for example, we have a good amount of space that's not wasted. Here's weather, and we've got a bunch of wasted space here, and then we have to make room for this little home line here. And that becomes a little bit of a problem from time to time. Just things that I think could be optimized better, and there's more that can be done. It just doesn't feel complete to me the more I use it. I think it's fast, like I said, but there's something about iOS 11 on here that doesn't feel 100% complete, and it is a little buggy from time to time. While it always feels fast, and I haven't had many crashes, I have had little things happen where there's occasionally little hiccups and things within the operating system where it's actually rebooted a couple times on me, depending on which version I'm running. So that's become a little bit of an issue, and that will get better over time, of course, but I think iOS 12 is really where this device will shine. The next negative is the front-facing camera. And while the front-facing camera is great, when you're using portrait mode, it's a little strange. It's a little fuzzy. If I take that picture there as I'm speaking and we zoom in, you'll see around my hair here, it's just kind of fuzzed out and not done right, and it can be done better, and that will improve over time. It's still in beta, but for everything else, the front-facing camera is great, but it's kind of a negative as far as that, especially compared to when you see the Pixel 2 XL and what it's doing with the front-facing camera. So that's kind of one of those things that it's not a horrible negative, but it is something to mention. The next negative is the price. Here we have the 64 gigabyte variants. In the 64 gigabyte variants, they're $9.99 each. So $1,000 plus whatever tax is in your area. And that's for the 64 gigabyte. If you want the 256, you've got to add another $150. And that bumps the price again. And so you've got $1,000+ device, no matter which configuration you get, or about $50 a month if you go for their plan. And that seems like an awful lot compared to the 8 Plus, which is also very expensive, but it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot new other than a slightly new form factor, an OLED display, and a little bit different camera. Other than that, Face ID itself does not warrant that price bump, in my opinion. Maybe the technology to get there does, and the research and development, but the actual price just doesn't seem justified, in my opinion. That leads us on to the next negative, is the cost of repairs. Unlike most phones, I've got a glass screen protector on here. I normally use a case on it too, and I'm someone that does not use cases on iPhones or many phones. And the main reason is I kind of like the user experience, how Apple makes it, and you'll see them walking around with no cases on them. I like that experience because it's all about textures and things like that. But if you want to repair this phone, this is going to be over $200 for a repair to the back or the front, $200 to sometimes $500, depending on what happens. And that's incredibly expensive, especially if you don't have Apple Care. If you have Apple Care, you have to pay $200 for that, and that's if you don't use it. Then it could be more expensive if you do use it. So that's one thing that I think will change over time, but right now is awfully expensive. The last negative is the size of it. And this for some people will be great. It's a bigger screen and a smaller form factor, sort of. If I switch over to my 8 Plus, you'll see that the 8 Plus is a wider display. So if I put the displays here like this, you'll see it's a little bit wider, but it's on the iPhone 10, it's actually taller. And I prefer the wider display because I actually had to increase the text size on this one just so I could kind of make it comparable to what I already had on the 8 Plus. So it was a little bit harder to see. It's more like using an iPhone 8 as opposed to an 8 Plus. And I like this new aspect ratio, but I also liked the bigger size of the 8 Plus. And that's kind of a negative for me. The bezels here are nice. They're thin. Maybe in the future they'll get even thinner. I'm not sure, but they're great right now. But that smaller screen size has me really missing my 8 Plus. Now, before we go, I have to mention Animoji. I don't see this as a positive or a negative, quite honestly. So here are the Animoji. I'll point it up here a little bit. And the Animoji track your face really well. As you can see here, I can switch between the monkey. And if I blink, it doesn't quite get that, but it does get your eyebrows really well. You can switch to the cat or the dog or the pig or this one or the fox. The alien one I like in particular, but I played with this for about a day and that was it. I think it's a neat idea. It's not something I'll probably use a whole lot. My kids will probably like to play around with it a little more than me, but it's just something that I don't find terribly useful. It's something neat that it can do, and I see this more as something as a positive when it comes to face tracking, what you can do in other applications when they come out. But that's just about it for this particular review. Let me know your thoughts about the iPhone 10 in the comments below. If you're going to stick with your iPhone 8 Plus or older iPhone, or if you're going to wait maybe for the next generation of iPhone next year, whatever we get. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Also, let me know which one you like better, or if you're going to wait for maybe a Pixel 2 XL. I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.